Welcome to A Class of Angels, the series where we take a look at advanced writing techniques through the lens of a silly vampire show from the early aughts. My name is Michael Aguero, and today we're looking at Season 1, Episode 6, Sense and Sensitivity. This episode is a character focus on Kate, our unnecessarily aggressive detective friend, and it features a monster of the week that reinforces that character focus. As we've seen in past episodes, most notably last week's, these are solid ingredients for a remarkable episode of compelling television. And yet, this episode is, well, it's not bad. It's good, kind of. Middling to good. What we might call serviceable. The episode has a solid structure with a decent enough plot and an underlying motivation of getting us to know and thus care about supporting character and occasional love interest, Kate Lockley. They even try tying Kate and Angel's arcs for this episode together by having them both need to open up about their feelings. So if this episode is doing everything those other great episodes did, why does this one fall short? That is what we're going to be looking at in today's episode, Sense and Sensitivity. Alright, so let's try and break this one down. Kate needs help catching a mobster and enlists Angel's help in tracking him down. The mobster is represented by our big bad guys, Wolfram and Hart, and so supernatural efforts are made to help the mobster beat the murder charge against him. Our monster of the week is a demon-worshipping sensitivity trainer with a magic stick that makes people overly emotional with zero external filter. This is compounded by Kate's strained relationship with her father, also a cop, who is now retiring. These two things come to a head when Kate shares way too much at her father's retirement party, embarrassing them both. There's a big fight scene at the police station, and all's well that ends well. Like I said, a solid foundation for a television episode if there ever was one. This is an episode about emotions, so one potential culprit in its limited success could be the acting, as we need those actors to do well for the emotional connection to resonate. But I think the acting here is perfectly fine. All our main players act with the same ability they've always displayed, and Kate, the focus of the episode, does a pretty good job with the material she's given. Another culprit could be the tone. This entire episode is meant to be comedic, with only the occasional tug at our heartstrings. Humor is deeply subjective and can be risky to hang an episode on, but I think it largely works here as well. Angel dressing up like a tourist is funny, the cop letting the prisoners out only to be mobbed by them is good for a chuckle. It won't go toe-to-toe with a polished stand-up special, but for weekly TV this holds water. So what then is the actual problem with this episode? What weighs it down, making it merely middling rather than another great one? We know these writers are capable of it, so what's holding them back? Well, I think it's the writing. I know, big surprise, a show about writing talks about the writing. I see two major problems with the writing in this episode, and they're both pretty subtle if you don't know what you're looking for. The first is the economy of storytelling. All of the scenes in this episode are only ever doing one thing. That thing is invariably either showing us more about Kate's character, her background or motivation, or moving the plot forward. This is not a bad thing in and of itself. Sometimes the scene only needs to do one thing. But as we've seen in past episodes, using scenes to accomplish multiple things can really add to the overall effect of a given episode. The real crime here is not that a scene only does one thing, it's that every scene only does one thing. This gives the episode a slower, more methodical pacing. It doesn't help that there's virtually no surprises or subversions in this episode either, aside from the nice one with Kate's father at the very end. We spend most of the episode knowing where the train is headed, and while we may enjoy the ride, we're also thinking about how long it will be before we pull into the station. The pacing unfortunately breaks down in this episode the more we look at it. Not only do these scenes only accomplish one thing, Many of them go on longer than they need to, including multiple lines of dialogue where a few would do. This is one of the things I mean when I say something is overwritten. Looking at any of these lines individually doesn't reveal anything wrong. They're well written and a good use of language. But taken together and you get scenes that drag, that have an obvious point but labor getting there, much like our train trying to reach the station. You can see this most notably in Kate's big speech at the retirement party. This speech has to do a lot. It has to set up Kate's relationship with her father, her mother dying, knowing how that affected both of them. This is the climax of the episode, and it's meant to anchor us in Kate's character moving forward. Each individual line within the speech is well crafted, and we even get that wonderful little tidbit about the friend's mom that acted as Kate's surrogate mother and gave her the affection her father never could. But is it really necessary? When watching back through this episode, the thing that strikes me the most is that it isn't tight enough. Many of these lines could have been cut and the scenes made punchier, or outright folded together. It's as if this script needed another edit. But the episode is so thin that once you start cutting stuff, you're left with only half an episode. And that's the real problem. The lesson behind the lesson. This episode started out with a clear goal: make a character-focused episode about Kate. They came up with a monster of the week that would facilitate that goal, and did so in a way that would necessitate Angel's help, as he is the main character after all. The writers stopped there, executing on the goal in a way that utilized strong fundamentals of writing. But that's all they did. The writers didn't take this episode farther. They didn't push it to be more than it was. True, we get that scrap of a scene to push Doyle and Cordelia's romantic subplot forward, but that's really only there because of the time constraint in Doyle's arc, not because of anything special to this episode. We've seen in past episodes, like the excellent one last week, where the writers were able to layer in other plots or themes in order to add to the episode, in order to elevate it above the standard fare we expect from network television. The episode doesn't do anything particularly wrong, but it doesn't do anything particularly right either. It does only what it needs to do and nothing more, and that is why it ends up being just another forgettable episode of television. Serviceable, but not memorable. That's it for Season 1, Episode 6, Sense and Sensitivity. A quick one this week. If you want to support the channel, you can do so by purchasing my short stories on Google Play. The latest is called Mary Had a Golden Lamb. It's about a far-flung future where humanity has maxed out the tech tree and so passes the time by stealing a sheep from a medieval monastery. If that sounds like your thing, you can purchase it for only $2. Links in the description. Every bit of support helps the channel grow and buy better equipment to make the best videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Forgot to turn one of the lights on, so we're going to have to do that again. So far, I haven't made any funny mistakes, so there may not be bloopers this week.